Welcome back to Speak Up Queen, the podcast where we empower, uplift, and celebrate women who have reclaimed their voices to inspire others. Today, we are honored to introduce a truly remarkable woman, Carmen Mertes Garcia, whose courage, resilience, and adventurous spirit inspire everyone she meets. Carmen has faced her fears head on, whether it's snorkeling in the great blue hole of Belize, despite her phobia of the ocean, ziplining above jungle canopies, or walking barefoot across red hot coals. Her bravery is equally evident in her personal life. After losing her husband to pancreatic cancer, Carmen channeled her grief into mentoring other women, other widows, providing them with the compassion and support they need to navigate their sorrow. As the founder of Faith-Filled Widows and facilitator of Hope for the Widow's Journey, Carmen is a guiding light for those finding their way through loss. She is also a proud author, mother of two sons, and Nina to her two beloved grandchildren. Her declaration of herself as queen on her 50th birthday is a testament to her empowerment and the unapologetic way she embraces life. Get ready to be inspired by Carmen's incredible journey, her heart for serving others, and her unwavering resilience. Let's give a warm welcome on Speak Up Queen to Carmen Mertes Garcia.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me here. And it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Carmen, can you start by telling us what does healing mean to you and how has your journey brought it shape you to the woman you are today?
Okay. I think that healing is different for different things that we go through in our life. And there are things that time does heal, but there are other things that it's a lifelong journey. And I think that grief from losing or having a loved one die, whether it be a child or a parent you're close to or a spouse, that those are actually lifelong. It's a lifelong journey of healing. And for me, it is being a widow. And I'll speak for as a widow because even though there's commonalities in grief, each one, if you're a parent that's a child has died, or your mother or father has died that you're close to, or you're even a widower, a man whose wife has died, or a widow, I think that there are commonalities that are specific to each of those. So I speak as a widow on my healing journey, and I would say that it's certainly something that I could never have imagined, the pain and the grief. And I think that most widows feel that way from from the widows that I see and read about in my groups, that until you actually are thrust into this land of grief, as I call it, you have no idea. And it doesn't matter really if your husband died suddenly and unexpectedly, or if it was a long time, terminal illness. Like I have a friend that her husband battled cancer for 15 years. So there was a lot of anticipatory grief. There was a lot of preparation for what was going to happen, what she was going to be going through. And yet she said that she could never have imagined what it's really like until, she's actually in it. And for me, it was from the first symptom that we knew of Michael having pancreatic cancer until he passed was 9 months. So that's kind of an in between, of those. But yet it's still, you just don't understand it until you actually go through it. And I think that realizing that this is a lifelong journey is something never ever prepared for. I think that we think that at some point you're going to get over it. There's no end point, until you leave this earth, I think, because I miss him every day. It doesn't mean that I'm stuck, but I miss him every day. And for us as widows, there's always that reminder for however long it may be, if nothing else, when you go to bed at night, he's not there. And even if you've had a really good day, there's that reminder, in the evening. So I think the healing is there's no stages. There's the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, 5 stages. That's not realistic. And even she came along and said that is that you may go through all of those different things, anger and denial and all of those things, but they're not like, okay, I made it through this one, now it's going to be the next step, in the next one. It's like, I think it's like this ball of twine, this all tangled up, and you may go through anger and then maybe or denial or whatever it may be, and then think you've been through that, and then maybe even years down the road it hits you again. So I think that the healing of the grief is, I saw this image one time of these glass jars. Like it starts out a little jar and then a bigger jar and a bigger jar. And the grief was like this ball that was inside of it. And in the beginning, the grief takes up the entire space of the jar. And then over time, the grief stays the same size, but the jar gets bigger. So I think that we kind of build strength around the grief as time goes on.
Wow, that's such a nice way to explain that. That's and it's so true. The feeling never goes away. You still miss the loved ones that you've lost. Yeah. Can you share a moment when you chose self-discovery over self-doubt and what you've learned about yourself?
Okay. I think that, again, speaking for widows in general, I think that just being a widow is the whole process of self-discovery and overcoming self-doubt. Because, there are many of us who we were independent women before we married our husbands. In my case, I had been married before and divorced, and it was about 5 years later that I met Michael. So I had that time when I was independent, and even with Michael and me, we were very interdependent, not codependent, and but when your husband dies, you suddenly realize that there's things that he did that now you have to do, and decisions that you have to make that are, pretty major decisions at times. And just a couple of examples for myself is, this may seem like a little one, but it was a big one for me, is that I'm a small person, and to lift heavy things, there are some things I can't lift, and Michael would lift them, right? And one example is that I was going to go on a road trip and by myself, and my suitcase was heavy. I tend to overpack, so my suitcase was heavy. So I had to lift that suitcase up and over and down because my trunk goes kind of down. And I couldn't do it. It was so heavy. But I realized I have to do it. There's nobody around, to help me. I have to do this. And somehow I did it. I don't know if adrenaline took over or if Michael was there helping me or, or Angel was helping me or what, but I did it. And I'm going to use another widow as an example of this also. There's a widow that's in one of the groups that I belong to, and she was in Florida in one of the terrible hurricanes that hit Florida, not so long ago. And her husband had only died 6 weeks before, and she was alone. So they had been in hurricanes together before, but she'd never been in one alone before. So she had to prepare everything. She had to go out and put the plywood, and put it over the windows. And she was doing it. She said that she thought she had the plywood up, and all of a sudden it just fell. It fell down. And she just collapsed, in sobs, just sobbing, and it does go through that. I can't do this. I just can't do this. And she came onto our group, on Facebook. And so a lot of people were encouraging her, just sob it out, and then, just take a deep breath and you'll do it. And she did, and she managed to make it through the hurricane. But those are things that I think that for myself and for other widows is that there is doubt that we can do it, or we just feel like, I just can't do this. I just don't have the emotional strength to do it, if not the physical strength. But we do. And we discover that we do have that strength.
Wow. Yeah, such an inspiring story as well. Women are often seen as nurturers. How do you balance nurturing others while ensuring your growth and well-being?
Yeah, that's a big one. And I'm going to again apply it to what I know and what a lot of widows go through is the caregiver, being the caregiver. I was Michael's 24/7 caregiver. In the hospital, I was always in the hospital. I never left. I slept on creaky, recliner chairs and hard cots, and to be with him. I was an advocate for him. I was his voice. I was probably the widow from hell. I mean, the woman from hell, the wife from hell, because I always monitored what they were doing, and just making sure that everything, was okay. Michael and I were, just to give a little bit of background, Michael and I were living our biggest dream in a foreign country. We're from Colorado. We had been coming to Belize every winter for about 16 years. It started out, I came here first. I was doing an independent study for Colorado State University, where I was attending at the time. Never been to Belize, didn't know anything about Belize, and came here the first time on my own through that, and traveled around Belize on my weekends, and came out to this little island, Key Cocker, Belize. And as soon as I stepped foot on the pier, I knew this is it. This is my piece of paradise. And so I had someone film me. It was back in the days of video cassettes. I had someone film me, and I was standing on the beach and by this little beach house and telling Michael, you're going to have to come here. And I hope that when you do, when we come here together, I hope that you love it as much as I do, because if you don't, there's going to be a problem because I'm coming back. And so he came and he fell in love with it as much as I did. And so we traveled back and forth, starting at 2 weeks, and then a few weeks. And I was teaching community college online eventually, so I was able to teach from here. And he had a seasonal job that closed down in the wintertime, so we were able to start coming for longer periods. And so eventually a dream wove itself into our heart that we wanted to move here. It took about 7 years for that to come together. And so when it finally did, we packed our entire life into 6 suitcases and came here. We didn't own a house, so we moved out of the rental. We sold everything, our vehicles, everything, to come here, because we had about a 15-year plan, or maybe more. And so we became residents of Belize, and he opened an art gallery. He'd never owned a gallery before. He was an amazing artist, but here he had a little gallery on a tropical island, and it became #1 on TripAdvisor. Mm-hmm. And it took us about almost 2 years to go through all of that. And then he said, after about, when the gallery was up and running and we had our residency, he said, I've never felt healthier or happier in my life. And he looked it and he felt it. And About 6 weeks later, he had lost a tremendous amount of weight and he was in excruciating pain. And we didn't know what was wrong with him. So I had to get him on a little flight, a little puddle jumper flight to the mainland and to a hospital, which was a little scary because we're like, 3,000 miles from family in the States and in a third world country. But the hospital was really a good hospital. The doctors were amazing. He got really good care. But to kind of, and then we had to get him on an emergency flight back to the States because there's only so much they could do and they didn't know what was wrong with him. So through all of that time, from the beginning symptom until he passed, I was taking care of him. And probably getting no more than 2 or 3 hours of sleep in that whole time because he was in pain so much. And when he wasn't in pain, he really did have this spirit of joy, though, which encouraged me and encouraged others and all that. But after a few months, I was so weary. I was so weary physically, and I was weary emotionally. And I just felt I can't do this. And I felt guilty, feeling that. So I think that that's part of the nurturing too, is that we give so much of ourselves. And then when we do become weary, that we feel guilt. We feel guilty for feeling weary. And so I think that one of the boundaries, one of the way, not boundaries, but the way we balance that is that we can't beat ourselves up, for one thing, when we start to feel weary, whether it's emotionally or physically or both. And the other thing that I think about is, when you're on an airplane, excuse me, they tell you to put your oxygen mask on first before you help someone else, even if it's your child. You put it on first. And the reason, if you run out of oxygen, you're not going to be able to help somebody. You're not going to be able to help your child. So I think about that is that's the balance in our nurturing, is when we start to feel weary, when we start to feel that we're giving too much, whether it be of our time or our money or our energy, whatever it may be, that we have to stop and ask ourselves, do I have my oxygen mask on? I have to take care of all of those things for myself before, and it's not selfish, it's self-care, so that we can care for others.
That is so true. And I'm so sorry that you had to go through those things. It's not, my husband's cousin had also cancer and he passed away. He was in my class, in my age. And I can still remember the pain that he had, the screaming, that voice of hurt and pain. And yeah, it's just, I have so much respect for people who survive cancer, the people who've passed, and the people who are left behind. I've got so much, it's just, amazing.
Yes.
But we definitely need to take care of ourselves. I mean, I was doing last year 80 episodes in 6 weeks and I was dead. And this year I just said to myself, I can't. I need to slow down. My body cranked up. I was not healthy. My husband and my son, I didn't see them. At the end of the day, yes, we have goals and we've got all these dreams, but it's not worth it if the people close to you can't celebrate it with you. So,
Right.
yeah,
Yes.
we definitely need to take care of ourselves, and it's definitely self-care is not selfish at all.
Mm-hmm. I think that women have a real issue or a problem with that. I think it's difficult for us because, maybe because we nurture our children and take care of ourselves when we're pregnant and, nursing our babies and, whatever it may be, that we're just, the nurturers and but we do have to have that balance.
Definitely. What inspired you to reclaim your voice, and how has that choice impacted your life?
I in 2018, which was a few years after Michael passed, he passed in 2015. And in 2018, I came across this Facebook group called Unstoppable Influencers. And there was a 21-day challenge of self-discovery and also finding our purpose or, meaning or something, something like that. And I just felt that since Michael had passed, I had really felt I lost a part of myself, which that's normal also. And that I wasn't the same person. I used to be an overachiever. I won Master Teacher of the Year. I won a National Teaching Award. I did empowerment seminars for women. I had 10 things on my plate and I could do them, you know. And and I was a writer also. I had published a book and did writing for a magazine. And after he passed, it was like it just all went away. I lost my confidence. I lost my desire. I was, at first you're in shock for one thing. Then when that kind of wears off, you're just like, who am I? And so when I came across this Facebook group, Unstoppable Influencers, I decided to go for the challenge. And I did it. I went through it the first time and then I went through it another 21 days. I think it was during that second time that one of the assignments was to do live Facebook videos. That was scary at first. But then I started doing them. And then the other thing was to find what your purpose is. So for me, it was like, what meaning does my life have? Without Michael, without my soulmate, what meaning does it have? I mean, I don't even feel like I want to go on, but I had already belonged to a widows group on Facebook, and it was very, very helpful to me, very encouraging, very supportive of one another. And I'm a Christian, so I thought I want to start a Facebook group for widows that's faith-based. And you don't have to be a Christian to be on it. It's just that if we want to talk about how our faith has gotten us through this, that we can, or to bring God into talking about our grieving and all of that we can. So that's how I started reclaiming my voice, was through starting and facilitating that. And also there was another woman in the group in Unstoppable Influencers that was doing a podcast. So that was my first interview as doing on a podcast. And then I, did others. And then I started interviewing widows also. And I would like to do more of that. I kind of did it as just just because I wanted to. But then I found that it was good for them to share their story. It was good for other people to hear their story. And there's a saying that I heard one time that said, your story may be someone else's survival guide. And so I encourage widows to tell their story. And it doesn't mean that they're going to do podcasts like this. It doesn't mean that they're going to write a book. It doesn't mean that they're going to, tell their story to strangers like I've done before, but maybe even bits and pieces of it now and then. Because I know that there's a lot that feel, no, I want to keep it to myself. And there are things that you want to keep to yourself. There are treasures, but that I don't want to burden other people, or, I don't want people to think that I'm, playing a victim, or, that I'm stuck in my grief or whatever. But even if you tell little bits and pieces, it helps you. I think it's part of the healing process, actually. And also, you really don't know who may be inspired by what you've said. There was one time when I was traveling, that was another thing that happened to me after Michael died. I had to buy a car at some point because I had no car when I went back because we gave up everything to go to Belize. So I went back to live in the U.S. That was a thing that after he passed in the States, but then I had to come back to Belize and make the decision whether to stay or not. That's another thing that doesn't always happen for widows, that thing that says don't make any major decisions for a year. Well, ideally, that would be great, but it's not feasible for many of us. And that was a big decision. So I did go back to the States. I bought a car and I started traveling, like little road trips, and kind of discovered this gypsy spirit, that I had. But I kind of lost my train of thought there where I was going with that. But but I think that I don't remember what I was talking about, but I think that just going along with that is that that we do find ourselves, and the stories, that was what I was going with, is that in one of my travels I was taking pictures and this woman came up and she asked me where I was from, and I told her, I started telling her their story, and I ended up telling her this story about Michael and me, and why I was traveling on my own, and she started crying. And I told her the whole story about Belize, about the cancer, about him dying, about everything, and she started crying, and she said, "Can I give you a hug?" And I said, "Sure." And she said, "I've never told my story to anyone." And it turns out that her husband had died a tragic death, and so she told me her story. So when you tell your story, it's not always about us. It's about helping someone else maybe find meaning or share their stories and get some healing through that also.
That's so true. When I started to do my Facebook lives, like you said, that's one daunting thing, to start doing Facebook lives and look yourself in a video.
No.
I started dancing on Facebook. And one of my friends that I've interviewed, she's like, "You were this silly South African dancing on Facebook with this confidence." And I think you call it invite, but I was jealous of you. But I said to her, if I didn't do it, I wouldn't have catch your attention. So sometimes we need to be the first people to get out of our comfort zones, to start being the first person to do the silly dance, so that other women can see, oh, if she can do it, so can I.
Mm-hmm.
So that is
Yes.
that's just for all the listeners listening today, is just know that, oh my word, your story matters, your voice matters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And also, I would just add that as widows, or again, I'm speaking because I'm a widow, I don't understand losing a child, but I would think it would be the same in this, is that as we tell our story, we're also saying their name. We're telling their story. We're making their life matter. We're carrying on their legacy and their memory. And that's another way. It's not just about us. It's about our loved one who's not here anymore.
I know when we lost my mother-in-law a year and a half ago, I've lost like 3 powerful badass queens in just 6 months.
Mm.
And one of the things that popped up was, you died twice. The first time when your body leaves the earth, or that, and the second time when someone speaks the last time about you or your name. And that was like,
Yeah.
I said to
Wow.
my husband and my son, because they were like this. My son and his grandma was so close. I said, I will never stop talking about her. Never ever. She
Mhm.
loved you dearly. And so we need to keep their memories alive because it's through us now that they are living on. That legacy
Yes,
is living on with us. And
yes.
just, it's
I
amazing.
think that there are people that tell us. I've been fortunate that I've had a lot of support, even from friends who haven't gone through this, that they're still supportive. But I know that a lot of people don't, that they don't have that support, and that they will tell you, it's been 3 years. You need to be over it by now. Why do you keep talking about him? And for me, it's like I don't pay any attention to that. That's one thing that I learned actually early on is I do not take advice from anybody who is not a widow because you cannot understand it at all. And neither did I. I didn't understand it. None of us did until we're actually, in it. And so um, we we have to do what we keep their memory alive, and we can't let anyone tell us that you need to stop talking about them, or even if you're maybe at family Thanksgiving or something and people don't want to talk about them because they're afraid. Sometimes they're afraid that if they say anything, it's going to bring up hurt for you. Well, we're already hurt. We think about them every day, so that's not the case. So maybe, and sometimes like you had said, that we have to be the voice. Sometimes we have to be the one to speak up and start the conversation about them or the memories about them, because they may not, because either they think enough time's passed, we don't need to talk about them, or they're afraid that they're going to make you feel bad, by bringing them up. So um, one of my grief mentors early on, Tom Zuba, who wrote a book, Permission to Mourn, A New Way to Do Grief, said that sometimes we have to be the teachers because people really don't know how to deal with your grief. They're uncomfortable with it. So sometimes we have to be the teachers, and kind of explain it to them that it's important for me to talk about him.
If you could send one empowering message to women around the world today, what would it be?
I would say to realize that you're strong inside, no matter what you're going through, that there is a strength inside of you. And I would say also to surround yourself with other strong women, and um, and I would say that in general for women, to surround yourself with other strong women, powerful women, empowered women, and um, to know that nobody else can live your life for you. No one else can tell you how to live it, and nobody else can tell you what your purpose is that you really truly feel inside. And sometimes people might think you're crazy, but I I went back to the States. I said, after Michael passed, and I was up without a home for 3 years, and without a car to begin with, and without a home for 3 years. But God took really good care of me. I think that was the thing that got us. That's the thing that got us through it, was Michael and me both. Our faith that got us through all of it, all the way to the end. He had faith, and then my faith got me through. After he died, and God was good to me. I have friends, that I stayed with, and then I bought a car, and then was, traveling, but I think that just to know that there is that strength in you, and so what I did is I eventually found a little cabin out in the country to live in Colorado, and I moved in there, and that was a reality hit again, because I had been living with people for a year or for 3 years after Michael passed. And then I moved into this little cabin, and all of a sudden the reality hit again, that he's not here. So that's a thing too, is that there are little reality hits that hit you from time to time. So I lived there for a while, and then I came back to Belize after being away for a few years, and I didn't know how it would be. I just came to visit, and I get on this little island the community of this little island is amazing. And they had known Michael and me from when we first started coming. As soon as I get off the water taxi onto the island, welcome home, Miss Carmen, welcome home, Miss Carmen, welcome home, Miss Carmen, and sharing stories of Michael, and we laugh and we cry and all of that. And I realized I'm not done here. And so I went back and decided I'm moving back here. So I did the same thing that Michael and I did, only I did it by myself. I gave up everything, except I kept my car this time. And a year and a half ago, I moved back here, and it's been a challenge because now I'm alone here, but I'm not alone because I have this whole community of people that have known me for a long time and knew Michael, and are very supportive and helped me, and got my back if I need it and all of that. But yeah, that was one that I think that for the most part people were supportive of it, but I think there were those that were like, why would you do that? Why would you go back there and on your own to the place where you and Michael were living your dream, and now he's gone? For one thing, you're bringing suffering onto yourself, which isn't the case, and so we just have to do what our heart tells us to do, along with wisdom, your heart and wisdom.
Definitely. The last question. What inspired you to say yes to being featured on Speak Up Queen? And what does this opportunity mean to you as a platform to share your story?
I think that it just goes back to sharing the story, that there are others that will be inspired by it, encouraged by it, and even if it only helps one person, then that's why I need to do it, or want to do it, to share my story. And I do hope that it inspires and encourages other people, widows for sure, other people who are grieving, and just people in general, and also to give people an idea of what widows go through, to kind of be the teacher, and to get them to think, well, maybe I need to go and, not criticize my friend for 5 years still grieving her husband or whatever, or just go and visit, the widow down the street who's 80 years old and lives alone after, losing her husband after 60 years of marriage. Maybe I just need to go and talk with her, so I think that that's part of why, I chose to do this. And as far as a platform, to get out there, that, for the widows groups that I have, anybody's invited to come. The one is, public. It's just open. I just post things. It's not really a, where you join. But then Hope for the Widow's Journey is one that you do have to request membership, and I do, monitor. There's screening questions and all that, because we need to keep it private and safe. And then whenever my book comes out, that maybe it will get out there and help people. And whenever I get my podcast going, that maybe people will, remember what I said and want to join in and listen to the stories of other widows as well.
Well, Carmen, thank you so much for sharing your powerful and inspiring story with us today. Your journey reminds us of the strength and courage it takes to heal, grow, and thrive. To everyone listening, remember your voice and your story have the power to inspire and create change. If today's episode resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe, comment, and share it with someone who needs this message. Until next time, Queens, keep speaking up and embracing your power.